Michael Stern had always been an exemplary citizen, a military veteran, owner of a small construction crew in the suburbs of Portland, father of 2 daughters, and husband to Elizabeth, a talented psychologist who worked with victims of violence. Everything changed on the rainy night of October 17, 2018. Elizabeth was returning from a charity event when 3 police officers stopped her on a deserted road. According to protocol, they should have checked her documents and let her go. Instead, they dragged her into the patrol car. When Elizabeth, beaten and broken, made it home in the early morning, Michael immediately took her to the hospital and called the police. But the officers who responded to the call were from the same department as the attackers. Evidence disappeared. Security footage was reportedly damaged. No witnesses could be found. Elizabeth was able to identify her attackers: Captain James Rodriguez, Detective Alex Morton, and Officer Christopher Parker. All 3 had impeccable service records, were heroes in local news stories, and officers with commendations. Michael appealed to every authority: the District Attorney's Office, the FBI, and the Police Internal Affairs Division. Everywhere he received the same answer: insufficient evidence. Meanwhile, a campaign to discredit Elizabeth began. Anonymous calls to her clinic, articles in the local press about an unstable psychologist, and threats against their children. After 3 months of harassment, Elizabeth broke down. Michael found her in the bathroom with slashed wrists and a note that read, "I'm sorry. I can't fight anymore. Protect our girls." At the funeral, Michael appeared detached. He sent his daughters to Elizabeth's parents in another state, sold his house and company. To the outside world, he became just another victim of tragedy, a broken man who couldn't bear the loss. No one knew that on that night, a completely different Michael Stern was born. Before disappearing, he left a package of documents at the prosecutor's office, the results of a private investigation with statements from witnesses who were afraid to go to the police. It was enough to start an official investigation, but insufficient for arrests. The officers were suspended from duty but remained free. Michael vanished, and 5 years later, the hunt began. What made the case particularly disturbing was the timing. Parker had just testified in the internal investigation regarding Elizabeth Stern's assault allegations. His testimony had effectively absolved himself and his colleagues of any wrongdoing, claiming Elizabeth had been intoxicated and combative during what was a routine traffic stop. Detective Sarah Wilkins, a 15-year veteran of Portland's Homicide Division with no connections to Parker or his colleagues, was assigned to the case. 5 years is sufficient time for a person to completely transform, especially when every minute is dedicated to a single purpose. After disappearing from Portland, Michael used his military connections to obtain new documents under the name James Foster. He spent his first year in Texas, working with Special Operations veteran Ramon Ortiz, who, unaware of his student's true motives, trained him in modern surveillance techniques, infiltration, and interrogation methods. Michael then relocated to New York, where, posing as a freelance journalist, he attended court proceedings to study the weaknesses in the justice system. There, he met Neil Kowalski, a hacker convicted of breaching government databases. In exchange for assistance with legal matters, Neil taught him the fundamentals of cybersecurity and digital footprint tracking. During his 3rd year, Michael worked as a security guard for a private military contractor, perfecting his weapons handling and tactical skills. He spent his 4th year in Miami where, under the guise of a security consultant, he studied the methods employed by drug cartels and corrupt police officers. Throughout this period, he regularly altered his appearance, growing a beard, building muscle mass, using contact lenses to change his eye color, and learning to modify his gait and voice. Nothing remained of the former Michael Stern. He dedicated the final year of preparation to gathering information about his targets. Captain Rodriguez had been promoted to deputy police chief. Detective Morton had left the police force to establish a private security agency. Officer Parker had been dismissed following an investigation but, thanks to his connections, secured a position in casino security in a neighboring county. In a warehouse on the outskirts of Portland, rented under a fictitious name, Michael set up his operational base. The walls were covered with photographs of targets, maps of their movements, and relationship diagrams. Metal cabinets housed his arsenal, weapons, electronics, and interrogation tools. In the corner stood a cot, the only indication that a person lived there. On the bedside table was a photograph of Elizabeth and their daughters, the sole personal item. 5 years of preparation had concluded. Michael Stern was dead. The executioner was born. In January 2018, James Foster, the identity Michael now fully embodied, returned to Portland. He rented a modest apartment in the industrial district, far from his former neighborhood. The location offered strategic advantages: minimal security cameras, easy access to major roads, and a demographic where newcomers raised no suspicions. Foster established a routine that made him virtually invisible. He worked remote IT jobs, communicating with clients only through encrypted channels. His neighbors knew him as a quiet veteran who kept to himself, a common enough story that discouraged further questions. When necessary, he wore a well-crafted persona of a man struggling with mild PTSD, which explained any unusual behavior and kept curious individuals at a distance. At night, Foster would transform his apartment into an intelligence center. Multiple monitors displayed surveillance footage from cameras he had strategically placed near his targets' homes and workplaces. Custom software developed with Neil Kowalski's guidance analyzed patterns in their daily routines, identifying vulnerabilities in their security measures. Foster had meticulously planned each step of his revenge. The operation wasn't about quick satisfaction. It was about systematic destruction. His targets wouldn't simply die. They would first lose everything they valued, just as he had. Their reputations, careers, families, and finally, their lives would be methodically stripped away. By March 2018, Foster had completed his reconnaissance. Captain Rodriguez, now deputy chief, had developed a drinking problem following his second divorce. Detective Morton's security business was struggling with financial difficulties, forcing him to take on clients with questionable backgrounds. Officer Parker had developed a gambling addiction that put him deeply in debt to his casino employers. Christopher Parker, a former police officer and now head of security for the night shift at Golden Horseshoe Casino, lived the life of a man who had escaped justice. With a generous salary, an apartment overlooking the river, and a young girlfriend who worked as a dealer at the casino, his dismissal from the police force was merely an unpleasant episode he quickly forgot. Parker was the most careless of the three. He didn't hide his address, change his phone number, or worry about security. He believed the incident with the builder's wife was long forgotten. This carelessness became his death sentence. Michael observed him for 2 weeks, studying his daily routine, routes, and habits. He knew that after his shift at the casino, Parker always stopped by Johnny's bar for a couple of glasses of whiskey before heading home. On Friday, March 12, 2021, when Parker left the bar and walked toward his car in the deserted parking lot, a man in a casino worker's jacket called out to him, "Mr. Parker, you forgot your phone at the bar." When Parker turned around, Michael shot him with a tranquilizer dart from a silenced pistol. Within seconds, the former officer was lying unconscious on the asphalt. Parker regained consciousness in an industrial freezer at an abandoned meat processing plant. His hands and feet were chained to a metal table, his mouth sealed with duct tape. Standing before him was a person in a surgical mask, rubber gloves, and protective suit. "Welcome to court, Officer Parker," Michael said, removing the tape from his mouth. "Today, you will answer for Elizabeth Stern." Parker first tried to deny everything, then to threaten, and finally, to beg for mercy. When Michael began methodically applying interrogation techniques he had studied over 5 years, Parker broke down and revealed everything. How Captain Rodriguez selected women, how they used police databases to find victims, how they destroyed evidence. Elizabeth wasn't the first or the last. Michael recorded the confession on video and then delivered justice. What happened in that freezer was a brutal reflection of what his wife had endured. A week later, on March 20, 2021, fishermen found a body with severed limbs in the river. Police quickly identified Parker through fingerprints. In his apartment, they discovered a video recording with confessions to crimes against women, including Elizabeth Stern. However, the recording had been edited, the names of his accomplices removed. The news reported a brutal murder of a former police officer and a possible connection to the Stern case. The police chief promised to find the killer. The investigation was headed by Deputy Chief James Rodriguez. Detective Samantha Walsh, a veteran homicide investigator with the Boston Police Department, was assigned to the case. She immediately noticed inconsistencies in the evidence. The precision of the cuts on Parker's body indicated someone with medical or anatomical knowledge. The edited confession video was professionally done, erasing all metadata that could help trace its origin. "This isn't some random revenge killing," Walsh told her partner, Detective Thomas Chen, as they examined crime scene photos in their cramped office. "This was planned for months, maybe years, and whoever did this wanted us to find that confession." Walsh's investigation led her to review Parker's personnel file. His dismissal from the force 3 years earlier had been classified as a resignation for personal reasons. But confidential notes mentioned an internal affairs investigation that was suddenly dropped. When she requested access to the full IA files, she was stonewalled by the department. "The files are sealed by court order," explained Lieutenant David Miller, head of records. "You need approval from Chief Rodriguez himself to access them." What Walsh didn't know was that Rodriguez had already ordered surveillance on her. Alex Morton learned about Parker's death from the news. When he saw the mention of the Stern case, he immediately understood the situation and enhanced the security measures for both his security agency and home. He hired additional guards, installed surveillance systems, and abandoned his usual routines. Morton was smarter and more dangerous than Parker. A former detective specializing in violent crimes, he thought both like a criminal and a hunter. His agency, SHIELD, provided security for wealthy clients and offered services for resolving delicate problems, often operating in legal gray areas. Michael understood that a direct attack on Morton would be suicidal. Instead, he chose a more sophisticated strategy. Posing as a wealthy investor from Chicago in need of security services, he contacted the SHIELD agency. During his meeting with the company representative, he insisted on working exclusively with the head of the agency personally, citing the sensitive nature of his situation. Intrigued by the potentially lucrative contract, Morton agreed to meet at an upscale restaurant on March 15, 2018. He arrived with 2 bodyguards, but this didn't deter Michael. During dinner, Michael discreetly slipped a compound into Morton's drink that would induce symptoms of a cardiac episode several hours later. When Morton was rushed to Mercy Hospital in downtown Boston, Michael used forged CDC physician credentials to gain access under the pretense of testing for a rare infection. In the hospital room, he administered a paralyzing agent to Morton, who remained conscious but unable to move. Michael then showed him Elizabeth's photograph. "She was number 40, Morton whispered, believing he was dying. "Rodriguez keeps count. He has an entire collection. Videos, trophies, everything in his country house. Basement behind the wine cellar." Michael recorded the confession on a voice recorder. Unlike Parker, Morton didn't beg for mercy. "You're the husband of that psychologist, aren't you? She was special. Fought longer than the others." Morton's final words faded into a rasp as Michael injected him with a lethal dose of a substance that mimicked complications from a heart attack. The death appeared natural. No one connected it to Parker's murder. No one except Rodriguez. The following day, Michael sent a copy of Morton's confession to the FBI and journalists investigating the Stern case. The recording clearly captured the words about Rodriguez's collection. The circle was beginning to close. James Rodriguez, a 58-year-old real estate magnate with connections throughout New England, had cultivated a pristine public image over decades. Born to Colombian immigrants in Queens, New York, he had built his empire through a combination of business acumen and ruthless determination. What the public didn't know was that SHIELD Security had been protecting more than just his properties for the past 15 years. Agent Samantha Jones of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit had been investigating a series of disappearances across 3 states since 2012. The victims, professional women between 30 and 45, seemed to have nothing in common until Elizabeth Stern's case provided the first tangible connection. The anonymous tip with Morton's confession suddenly illuminated a pattern that had been nearly invisible, hidden behind the perfect cover of Morton's security expertise and Rodriguez's wealth. James Rodriguez, the deputy police chief of Oak Ridge County, was furious. 2 members of his hunting club were dead, and the FBI had begun an investigation based on anonymous materials. He sensed someone was methodically destroying his carefully constructed empire of impunity. Rodriguez wasn't just another corrupt cop. Behind the facade of a respected police officer lurked a predator who had hunted women for decades. He had created an entire system, selecting victims through police databases, using his position as cover, and either blackmailing or buying the silence of colleagues. His hunting club included not only Parker and Morton, but other influential people in the city. After Morton's death, Rodriguez increased security at his country estate, where he kept his collection, video recordings, and personal belongings of his victims. He surrounded himself with former military personnel, installed state-of-the-art security systems, and rarely left the house. And he waited. Michael understood that a frontal assault on Rodriguez's fortress was doomed to fail, but the beast couldn't hide forever. Using information from Morton, Michael discovered that once a month, Rodriguez met with a mysterious visitor, an elderly man whom the security team allowed in without inspection. After tracking this person, Michael learned he was Victor Rodriguez, James's father and the former chief of police, now living in a nursing home. It was Victor who had taught his son how to hunt and cover his tracks. According to Morton, Victor knew all his son's secrets and served as his confidant. Michael infiltrated the nursing home disguised as a new orderly. At night, when the rest of the staff was occupied with an unexpected gas leak on another floor, he entered Victor's room. "I know who you are," the old man said upon seeing Michael. "My son said you would come." "Then you know what I want," Michael replied. "The code to the safe in James's office, where he keeps copies of all the recordings," Victor smirked. "Without them, you can't prove anything." After 3 hours of conversation, Victor revealed not only the safe code, but also the house's security system layout, the location of secret passages, and the guard rotation schedule. The old man knew he wouldn't survive the night, but protected his son until the end, releasing information in small pieces, hoping he would have time to warn James. In the morning, a nurse found Victor dead in his bed. Doctors declared it a natural death. A heart attack in an elderly man raised no suspicions. Having obtained the necessary information, Michael began the final stage of his operation. He knew time was short. Rodriguez would certainly suspect something was wrong when his father didn't contact him after the orderly's visit. On the night following Victor's death, an unusual tension filled Rodriguez's mansion. Deputy Police Chief Anthony Rodriguez was unable to reach his father, something that rarely happened. Growing increasingly anxious, he tripled the security detail, verified all safety systems, and locked himself in his office to review security footage from across the property. Michael Stern chose not to launch a frontal assault. Instead, he exploited a vulnerability in the security system, an underground tunnel connecting the house to Lake Michigan, which Victor had revealed in his final moments. The passage had been constructed during the Prohibition era of the 1920s and was presumed abandoned and forgotten by most. At 11:42 p.m. on April 18, 2019, Stern infiltrated the mansion through this tunnel, methodically neutralizing the guards without killing them, using tranquilizer darts that rendered them unconscious within seconds. Utilizing the security codes and layout plans provided by Victor, he disabled the alarm systems and surveillance cameras one sector at a time, moving like a ghost through the sprawling estate. By midnight, Rodriguez sensed something was amiss when the regular check-ins from his security team suddenly stopped. When he tried contacting them through the internal communication system, he received only silence. As panic began to set in, he reached for his personal firearm, a custom Sig Sauer P226 that rarely left his side. When Rodriguez finally opened his office door to investigate, he found Michael sitting calmly in his leather executive chair, the open safe behind the bookshelf, exposed with its contents spread across the mahogany desk. "You're too late, Deputy Chief," Michael said with cold precision. "I've already found what I was looking for." The desk displayed an array of damning evidence: hard drives, flash drives, personal effects of victims, dozens of pieces documenting the crimes of the hunting club that had operated with impunity in Chicago's wealthy North Shore suburbs for over 2 decades. Among these items lay a photograph of Elizabeth Stern, Michael's wife. "Stern!" Rodriguez snarled, raising his weapon. I thought you broke after her death. I died with her, Michael replied, his voice devoid of emotion. But before I left this world, I swore I'd take you with me. The ensuing gunfight was brief, but devastating. Rodriguez managed to fire several shots, hitting Michael in the chest and thigh. Michael emptied his entire magazine into Rodriguez, each bullet finding its target with surgical precision. Bleeding heavily, Rodriguez attempted to crawl toward a hidden door leading to a panic room. "You're a fool, Stern," he gasped through blood-filled lungs. "You think this changes anything? There are thousands like me in the system. We're untouchable." "I'm not trying to change the system," Michael responded, pulling out a phone and pressing send. "I came only for you. As for the system, it's already changing." At exactly 12:17 a.m. on April 19, 2019, major news outlets across the United States simultaneously received materials sent from Michael's phone. Video recordings of the hunting club's crimes, victim lists, names of high-ranking club members, and locations containing additional evidence. Rodriguez's entire archive became public knowledge in an instant. Simultaneously, FBI offices nationwide received copies of these materials with detailed instructions for locating the remaining evidence. Michael had meticulously planned this moment for 5 years since Elizabeth's disappearance in 2014, creating an information dissemination system that couldn't be stopped once activated. At 1:23 a.m., an FBI tactical team stormed Rodriguez's mansion in Lake Forest, Illinois. They found the deputy police chief's body in his office, surrounded by evidence of his crimes. Nearby lay an unknown man with multiple gunshot wounds, barely alive, clutching a photograph of a woman. The man was transported to Northwestern Memorial Hospital under heavy guard. Surgeons fought to save his life, but the injuries proved too severe. Before his death at 4:58 a.m., he briefly regained consciousness. "Are you Michael Stern?" asked FBI Special Agent Ramirez, who had been stationed by his bedside. "Michael Stern died 5 years ago," he whispered, his final words barely audible. "I'm merely an instrument of justice." The man who brought down the organization was later identified as Michael Stern, a former Navy SEAL and software engineer whose wife Elizabeth had disappeared in 2014, now confirmed as one of the hunting club's victims.